Hello everybody, welcome to another painting video with myself, John. In this one we're going to be checking out some Bolt Action, and we're going to be painting one of their late war paratroopers, their plastic ones. These represent not Normandy period, but they represent the stuff that was the equipment they were wearing in Operation Market Garden in Holland, and basically everything after that. The M43 uniforms had come in widely distributed across the army, the paratroopers and so on, so a lot of guys were wearing this new kit. And yeah, I'm trying in this video to paint as well as possible, but simply as possible, that type of uniform. So it's a little bit darker, there's not as much tan going on in the later war uniforms, so I've tried to represent that as close as I can, really, without going mad and starting to mix paints, which, hands up, I cannot do to save my life. Even if I write the mix down and make a swatch plate for it, I will never get that mix again, ever. Anyway, enough of the ramble. I do talk more historical stuff in the video and at the end as well, so if you want some historical information, you can check that out towards the end of the video. Anyway, let's get stuck in. So as usual, before we start, let's talk about what sprays I used. So first off was Citadel's Chaos Black, so that was given a coat all across the model. Then from a top down, I've dusted some Citadel Grey Sear as well, both from the spray can, nothing too fancy in this one. So because this paratrooper is wearing the stuff that was relevant to Operation Market Garden, he's wearing an M43 jumpsuit and M43 equipment, which largely means that a lot of the colours are basically variations of olive drab. You know, it's quite boring, but that's that's how the standardization was beginning to creep in at the later stages of the war. So everything started to become a bit more drab, a bit more uniform looking, and the M43 jumpsuit was basically the standard M43 uniform with a couple of extra pouches put on here and there, so that even at that stage there wasn't a lot of differentiation between the infantry and the paratroopers. So with that, with that little bit of ramble out of the way, we're going to start with our base coat. And our base coat is Citadel Deathworld Forest, because I think it's a nice mid-green to use as the base coat. So we'll be giving that probably a couple of coats over all the uniform. We'll not worry too much about going over the webbing and stuff like that. It's just for the trousers and the jacket. So that is what we'll be doing first. And if we need to, we'll give everything 2 coats of this just to make sure it's a nice flat colour. Now the Deathworld Forest has had its 2 coats and been left to dry, we have this sort of light-ish sort of olive green, and what we're going to do next is shade it. So we're going to use some Athonian camo shade for this, and we're just going to give the cloth parts of his uniform just a bit of a coat of this, just to add a bit of texture, a bit of darker tones to the cloth. So this stuff isn't terribly heavy, and it should go a good way to just giving us the shading that we need without darkening the cloth too much. There will be a dry brush step though once this is down and dry. The wash is now dry, and we can check out what that has done for our shading. So it's mostly quite subtle. There's not a lot of deep recesses and stuff like that on this figure. It's just a little bit of, you know, curves in the fabric and stuff like that. So we're going to go on to a dry brush, which is definitely going to help the cloth effect on a little bit. So I have Vallejo Panzer Ace's canvas here, and I'm thinking of just dry brushing that straight on. I'm not too sure, so what I will do is give it a go, because it can't hurt to try. It's similar to the Deathworld Forest. It's just a little bit lighter and has a bit more of a browny tone to it, and I think that might work as a highlight to the cloth. So just get my dry brush ready here, I think, and that should be us good to go. So let's see what happens. So that isn't bad. Quite like how that looks. It's got sort of the right tones in there for M43, and yeah, I think we can work with that. Be quite content with that. So with that dry brush done, we're going to move on to blocking out some other colours here. Our main one really here is the boots, and the boots are a sort of a tan suede sort of a colour, and I'm just trying to see if I have anything to hand that would be close, or you know, close enough to say yes, that'll definitely work. And I have a couple of colours here that I'm trying to judge between. So I have Vallejo model colour beige brown and Panzer Ace's new wood, and I think, to be honest with you, we should probably go with the beige brown because it's a little bit darker, and just maybe once it's had a wash and a bit of weathering, perhaps it'll look a bit more close to the actual colour. I'm not too sure it really matters that much either. So the main thing is that the upper part of the boot and the lower part of the boot, so the lower part is all suede, but the upper part is a leather outer, so you could argue that you could do two different colours. You could probably use both colours that I selected there, use this one for the leather and use the lighter one for the suede, but I think once the troops started running around wearing these things and getting into combat and stuff like that, I don't really think the colour difference mattered or would have been so prevalent. I also read that in a lot of cases when these boots were issued, that unofficially a lot of paratroopers just continued to wear their corcorans. So if you're clever with it, if you have a set of paratroopers that have more of the D-Day setup, you could potentially get away with painting them in M43 colours, but keeping the Corcoran jump boots that sort of nice reddish sort of red leather or dark brown leather. So it's kind of really up to you at that point, because yes, the uniform was definitely changing, but the paratroopers tended to try and hold on to those signature items that they felt they'd earned. And the Corcoran boots were definitely something they felt they earned once they'd passed jump school and became paratroopers and got to wear them with their Class A uniforms and stuff like that. It was a real signature item. So I don't believe there's really any other leather to speak of. The rifle, the Garand there has a sling, so I'll maybe get another brush and get my smaller brush and just paint in the sling now, just to say that we have it done. There's also that front strap on the helmet, but that's typically a darker leather, almost the same colour as the Corcoran jump boots. Be a very dark, reddish sort of a leather. Whereas these slings and stuff, when they're brand new, they typically wouldn't have been worn in as heavily, so they might be a bit of a lighter colour. More often than not, I've seen them as a lighter colour, and it's only after 60-70 years where they look, an original one looks as dark as the jump boots. So I think that's going to do it for our beige brown. The next things I want to look at, well, the next thing I'm definitely going to look at is the helmet. And the helmet I'm going to be painting very simply with Castellan green, because it's a darker green than the rest of the uniform. So all we need to do is give it a coat of that, because later on we're going to be dry brushing a lighter colour over this to represent the helmet net. Because the helmet net is sort of a, how do you say it, sort of a browny, greeny sort of thread. And if done right, done carefully, that would give a very nice piece of contrast. Just to show that yes, this part was a different colour, and that helmet does have a net on it, and make the net a bit more apparent. So we're in the right realms of coloration here, which I'm liking. I'm quite happy with that. I think I'm going to go back to my Panzer Aces canvas, the colour we dry brushed with, and we're going to paint in the webbing now, because it's such a nice close colour. I think that the webbing will suit this, and what we can do is, instead of washing it in Anthonian camo shade, we can wash it in something else, probably an Agrax Ur shade, just to start differentiating it a little bit. So let's just start on the back and go for it with the canvas. And typically the canvas would have been a colour I would have painted the Normandy style paratroopers as the base and then dry brushed up to a lighter colour. But in this case, using the canvas's natural sort of darker tone works to our advantage a little bit. It still makes it stand out a little, but doesn't make it as bright or as tan looking as the older versions, or the M42 version of the uniform and the webbing that goes with it. In fact, we probably could get away with an Anthonian camo shade over this too, just to reinforce the material being a bit more green. We'll get the bayonet in there too. I don't know if that's a rigger pouch or what that is below the musette pack. Genuinely don't know. You can tell me in the comments, because I've not seen a pouch that shape before, unless it's a rigger pouch, a rigger's pouch. I'm also kind of hoping this tutorial works out, or this video works out well, because I have a whole army of these guys that I want to paint up as 82nd Airborne for Operation Market Garden, so I'm kind of hoping that I do well on this one so I can go ahead and paint my other 30 or 40 of them in the same way. Never say I don't get invested in some of my own paint jobs. Alright, well, I can't see the other part of the suspenders, so there is that strap on the back of the helmet. That paint's probably dry enough to do that in. So, let's see if I can get that on shot. Yeah, that'll do. So, we'll let that dry, and then off camera I'll apply a, or will I? No, I won't. I'll let it dry and then I'll do the washes for his boots and the webbing at the same time. Then we can probably spend a bit of time while that's drying working on the skin. So with all that dry, I have to mention as well, I forgot a couple of details. So the handle for the shovel, or the folding shovel, it has been painted Castellan green, as well as the, do they call it a frog? I think they call it a frog for bayonets or knives in there as well. I'm basing it on the later war one that I think was made of Bakelite, which had like an olive drab coloration to it. I also painted in his two tie straps on his legs. I painted them with Castellan green as well. Not going to worry about shading those. I think that's already enough as is. So let's get on to shading helmet and webbing, and we're returning to our Athonian camo shade for this. So we'll just quickly give the helmet a coat of that. I could afford to be using a bigger brush for this, but I'm not too worried. It'll be alright. Doesn't take that long to do anyway. So there we go. Now I will change brush size for the webbing. So let's get right to the back and let's start on the musette pack. Okay. Make sure it's not pulling too much. Seems to be doing okay. That's fine. So what we'll move on to next is another wash, which we will put onto our leather. And I think we're going to go with an Agrax. I think I mentioned before I wanted to go with an Agrax or shade. So that's what we'll be going with. And we'll just get that over our boots and the sling of the rifle. I think that's going to look pretty good. I always do like how Agrax really clings into the recesses. I don't know what formula it is lately, but that's how it comes across. It really does settle down quite nicely. Great, and then just the rifle sling. Doesn't need an awful lot. Okay, so let's move on to, let me see, what would be prevalent right now. Either skin or rifle. I think probably go with skin. Yeah, I think we'll go with some skin. So let me see if I have my favorite color. My favorite skin color of all time, heavy skin tone from Vallejo. And I'll put that down onto my palette, which is technically not a palette. It is a box that used to contain basing material. Now it contains alcohol. Not drink alcohol. It's the other stuff. So I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Okay, so it's just a case of getting the hands and face base coated with this. Always remember the back of the hand as well. It's a detail I frequently miss myself, so I'm trying to make sure I have that in as well. I'll go over the top because the thumb is there and it always hides away there for me too. It's a bit annoying. And the reason I'm doing this first is because when I come in to paint the wood of the rifle, I can clean up anywhere I've put too much of the skin tone. And just see how much I have to manipulate the model sometimes, so that I can try and make sure my lines are neat enough. Okay. So with a bit of skin tone down on him now, he is starting to look a bit more like a paratrooper, which is kind of what we want, really. It's kind of the end result, I think, that's the effect we're going for. So I'm going to move on to the wood of his rifle, if I don't throw the paint bottle away from me. And for that, I'm going to be going with Vallejo model color chocolate brown. I think Ryan probably wants to see the number a bit longer. There you go, mate. I flash these colours in and out of shot all the time. I'm sure it takes him a couple of times to figure out what colour I've just flashed. Or what I've flashed. So let's get a bit of that onto my brush. The heavy skin tone should have dried by now on the hands anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. The coat is quite thin. It's a very heavy pigmented paint. So all I'm going to do is give basically most of the rifle a coat of this, except the very end, because we know that's going to be a metallic. There are other places that are metallic on this rifle too, so we don't need to be overly neat because we will be painting over it again. To make sure that me anchoring myself on his helmet isn't removing paint or wash or anything from it. So that's something to be aware of. Something else to be aware of. And then if I try to do it without anchoring a finger from my painting hand or my brush hand, it becomes a whole lot more awkward. Can we reach this stalk? Kinda. Kinda, sorta. What about underneath that? The sling is largely covering that up. There's just a little bit under his arm there. skin tone on his face looks almost dry. That's good. I also think at this point that the webbing, the wash on the webbing has dried, and the wash on the helmet has dried, as well as his boots, which are almost dry. That's fine. So let's select another color, because I want to highlight that now. I think I'm going to try and highlight it with maybe US Field Drab. Let me see if that's going to be brighter or darker. It is going to be brighter, but I don't know if it's going to be too much of a brown tone or not. Be worth having a look at. I'd say we'll get away with that, but only just. Only just. So we're going to try and put a bit of a dry brush of this down over the webbing. We're not going to be able to catch all of it, clearly, because there's going to be a lot of it in shade and in more difficult to reach areas. So we're just going to try and give it a bit of a light dry brush over the larger pieces, like the musette pack, the pouch of which I have no idea what it's for, and the entrenching tool. I think that looks okay. Maybe a little subtle. Well, it looks alright to me from here. What I can do though is I'll go in with a finer brush and maybe just edge a little bit of it here and there. So let's have a look and see where we can edge a little. Just there, there and there. I'm worried that I'm going to start making things look a little too tan, so that's why I'm trying to be quite picky with the highlights here. I don't want it to look like Normandy era webbing too much. And underneath we have a bit more wiggle room because of how dark it is underneath the miniature. Very difficult to see in this lighting. But I think we managed that okay. Yeah, I think that looks alright. Not going to complain too much. So, what does the backpack look like? It's okay, yeah. I'm going to settle with it. I really honestly don't want to fight the colour too much, because I'll start making mistakes. And when I make mistakes, it's not very good. So, yeah, who would have thought making mistakes would be bad. For the boots, I'm just going to go with beige brown again. At least I think that was the first colour I did. Yeah, I think it was beige brown. And we're just going to give them a little bit of a dry brush. Wherever my dry brush has gone, did I drop it? Where did I put my dry brush? There it is. Sheesh. It's another one of those days. I'm having these days more and more often. So let's get our beige brown, and we're just going to very lightly catch the outer parts of the boot only. Not gonna do this on the inside. Let's make it look a bit more interesting. So on the wood of the rifle, I'm actually thinking if I do a little bit of this on it now before I start adding other colours. Once I put a wash down on this, it might look quite interesting. So just very lightly probably just work more on the top of the wood just to sort of lighten that up a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to move on briefly to a contrast paint for the rifle. Because it's already been pre-shaded with aerosols and stuff anyway, I'm happy enough to go ahead and do that, and we're going to be using Black Templar. Surprise, surprise, for a dark coloured part of metal. Now, hopefully using a small brush to apply this, I should get into the details I want to catch. So we have the slide here, or the bolt. And a lot of this stuff on the top and back of the rifle is metal. And there's a band, there's a metal band there where the sling goes on. Boy, that's a hard detail to see on that side of the rifle. It's basically not there. And then we have the end of the rifle. Also forgot about the trigger guard. Probably shouldn't forget about the trigger guard, because that's also a dark metallic piece. And there's a little bit underneath the rifle in front of that where the clip goes in, where the bottom of the clip rests in the bottom of the woodwork of the rifle. I think that'll do. I honestly don't want to try much harder than that, or I'm going to mess something up. So that ought to do that. Now let's work on dry brushing a colour onto the helmet, and I'm sorry I left that out of focus. My apologies. The helmet, or the helmet net in this case, is green, funnily enough, but it is a lighter green. So I'm going to take some of the canvas paint, the Vallejo canvas paint I still have left on my palette. I say palette again very loosely. And with our dry brush, let's see if I can get them into focus properly. It's just going to be a case of lightly brushing over the helmet net. We don't want to scrub the brush too much, otherwise we'll get into the areas that we've put the Castellan green and stuff into. So there we go. Pretty simple looking. Sorry, pretty effective for something so simple. Effective looking for something so simple. Jeez, I cannot speak today at all. Now, our Black Templar looks like it's dry, so the next thing on the rifle is going to be some Agrax Earthshade. Again, we're going to be applying this with a small brush just to make sure that we don't completely mess it up. Also lets me stay clear around the hands. Not that it's going to matter too much because they're going to get a wash soon anyway. I'm also starting to notice that light on my left hand side is really being obscured every time I go to move, so I wonder if I angle it up a bit more, will that help? Yeah, do you know what, that does help. My apologies, that has taken me so long to realise that. That's definitely a better position. Just a little bit more there. I think that ought to do it. So, leave him back in focus this time. And now I think I'm going to move on to his skin, and you're going to hate me because I'm going to cheat. Of course I'm going to cheat. I say cheat. I'm going to take another contrast paint. Normally I would go with a Guilliman flesh color. I might actually still do that, I'm not sure, because I'm kind of, not that one, there. I'm kind of falling for this Dark Oath flesh. I've used it in a couple other things, and I just like how it settles. I like the coloration I get from it. So we're going to use a bit of that, and again using a small brush. I immediately think I've made the wrong decision. It'll be fine, don't worry about it. He's just seen a few more sunny days than everyone else. He's in Holland in summer, so in September. Be fine. Well, what we can do is we can highlight this back up again, make it look a little less like he's been in a sunbed for 6 hours. That doesn't mean I like Dark Oath flesh any less, though. What I will do is dip my brush into some water, maybe try and add it a bit more thinly, see if that helps. Apparently that's too thin. Yeah, that's a bit happier looking. So can I remove some off its hand before it's too dry? Probably not. I am not that lucky. But anyway, yeah, those hands look really badly mauled. So we're going to let that dry, and then when we come back we'll look at maybe a couple other different things to do on the skin and see if there's any other details that we can hit up while we're doing that. So off camera, there's a couple of things I did which I'm going to finish off now on camera, mainly because I just couldn't see the details from where my camera position is. But I took a bit of Citadel lead belcher and painted in the buckles on the musette pack, the button, the snap on the folding shovel, the 2 snaps on his water canteen, the buckles on the buckle boots, and there's a button there, another snap on the first aid pouch as well. I only did those guys because I really genuinely can't see them with my camera angle and stuff, so I do apologize if you wanted to see that being done, but it wasn't an easy detail to try and catch. So we're still using lead belcher right now though, and we're going to be using it on the rifle. So what we're going to be doing is taking the small brush and just flicking it over the muzzle there, and we get that sort of nice used looking steel look, and then same over the back of the rifle, over the iron sights and the bolt. Just a little bit there. That might be a bit messy, but it should be alright. And then same on the other side. Like so. So not the worst looking rifle. So with the lead belcher done, I'll move that out of the way, get it out of my way. And we're going to move on to Cadian Flesh Tone. Now, I have Cadian Flesh Tone that has no label on it. But I know it's Cadian. It has to be Cadian, right? Pretty sure it's Cadian. And all we're going to do with this is just to clean up the hands a little bit. So let's bring our brush in. Start to make his hand look a little less tanned beyond all recognition. Tafu. If you know what snafu is, tafu is tanned. Tanned up beyond all recognition. That's mine and I'm keeping it. You can use it if you want. Copyright lines. So what we're really doing now is using this contrast paint that we put down before the Dark Oath Flesh just as a wash, and now we're just going to essentially highlight over it. Since I definitely picked too dark a contrast paint and made a mess, so now we're trying to fix the mess. And then on his face, because it's not as big a mess as the hands were, our job's a little bit easier. We're just going to be picking out his cheekbone, his jawline, over the nose, getting the lips a little bit of a touch too, just a little touch. Like that. So it's not, we're not going for a hyper realistic looking face here, we're just going for enough detail to say, yes, that's his face. That is indeed a face. That is what I'm looking at. I think we could probably go over the top here a little bit. Just to tidy that up. I will also say I missed another piece which I did off camera, and I do apologise for that. I took the same base brown, the chocolate brown we used on the rifle, pardon me, and painted the front strap across the top of the helmet, so that was done in chocolate brown as well. Now, is there any other glaring details that I've missed? Someone in the comments is going to say, what about your decals? Because these kits do come with decals now. Yes, I'm fully aware of that, and I lost them. I think I have looked up and down for them everywhere, and I cannot find my American Paratrooper decals, which means I've probably thrown them out. So I'm going to have to, unfortunately, buy another box of them just to get the decals. What a shame I have to buy more toys to make sure that my first set of toys were right. Yeah, okay. That's well, I think that's going to do it, because I would be happy to say that that has enough paint on it, enough highlights and shades on it to make me happy to see that down on the table. Now, of course, we're going to go and give it a matte varnish and paint the base black, because the matte varnish always makes the miniature look better. Once it has that finish down on it, it just looks so much tidier, because as you can see, and as I've said before a few times, different glazes, glosses, different washes, contrast paints, and paints themselves have a different finish to them. And as you rotate this miniature around, you can see that that Athonian camo shade really has more of a gloss finish to it, and that is really annoying. So giving that miniature a matte varnish once you're done will settle everything down and will show you the amount of work that you've done or not done, either or, and just give you a cleaner looking finish. So I always try to make sure that I do that now on basically every painting video that I do now. So off camera we're going to go do that, paint the base black. We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about this particular paratrooper and why I've done him the way I've done him. And here we are, we have our American Paratrooper circa Operation Market Garden complete. So, well, apart from transfers, because we lost those. Okay, so in general, the colour scheme is quite muted, it's quite dull, but it is more accurate to what the paratroopers were wearing after the Normandy campaign. Once the uniform became the M43 jacket and trousers, and the paratroopers were issued with that, as well as the buckle belts and the 43 pattern, or the M43 version of the webbing material. It was in a darker olive drab color compared to the tan that we're all recognized from Normandy. They became a far more uniform looking fighting force with the rest of the US military, and to an extent that's a good thing, and to an extent it kind of dilutes their personality a little bit, particularly in a tabletop game where your standard American infantry could look fairly similar to the paratroopers. But if you do it right and you have your paratroopers looking really like spot on with your coloration and markings and stuff, and if you have transfers and you haven't thrown them out like I have, like a silly idiot, you'll actually get your 101st or your 82nd patches down on them, and they'll look really good. Now, I've painted this guy with the intention of doing my army as 82nd Airborne. What difference does that make to the uniform? From what I've been able to read through two really good reenactment sites, Yankee Reenactment or Yankee Reenactors.nl, I can't remember, I will send those links through and hopefully they're in the description. And the other one was the 506th, 82nd Airborne 506th Parachute Infantry reenactors. These guys all look like they really know their stuff. Now, the Yankee reenactors are doing the 101st, but it's nice to get the two websites open together at the same time and compare their kit lists. And from what I can gather, the 82nd did a few things different to the 101st. From what I've been able to tell, the 82nd didn't have as much reinforcing patches on their jumpsuits, so the knee patches and elbow patches, I haven't seen as much of those on the M43 uniform. I also found out that I think it was an order from James Gavin as a sort of pass down to the units. Do not wear your paratrooper first aid kit, which is the cloth bag with the couple of canvas ties. Do not wear that on your helmet. You will wear that on your webbing strap or on your belt, or you'll tie it to something else. You will not put it on your helmet. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that was. Someone maybe will know in the comments if that's something that was particular, had some particular reasoning behind it other than just don't make your helmet look like you're an idiot. Perhaps because your first aid kit carried syrettes of morphine and stuff as well, you didn't really want that in a place where you could easily damage it. I could see the logic in that. Apart from that, the 82nd seemed to be very calm in how they wore their uniforms. They tended to go with the this is going to be really nerdy, and I apologize. I know that in the Normandy campaign, the 82nd jumped into Normandy. They all preferred the quarter-inch square helmet net rather than the half-inch or three-quarter-inch helmet net that you see the 101st wearing. I have no idea why that's become a preference or why it was a preference, but I think it speaks volumes for the fact that the 82nd had already done a combat jump in Sicily. I think it was Sicily. Yeah, I think so. They had already got one jump ahead of the 101st, so they kind of had a bit more of an idea of what they were doing. A few of their guys were a bit more experienced, kind of knew what to expect really when they were dropped into Normandy and subsequent drops after that. So it just seems to be there's a bit of a personality between the 101st and the 82nd, and if you're doing an airborne force for the tabletop, do look into that personality a little bit and see what you can do to make your infantry soldiers look a bit more like the guys that they're meant to be representing. So I always think it's fair just to go with a historical war game. If I can represent these people as well as I can, without going over the top and making them look too Hollywood, that's great. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, why do you think the 101st Airborne are so popular now? Because of Band of Brothers. The reenactment scene, for example, exploded when Band of Brothers came out. Everybody was doing 101st. My own reenactment group in Northern Ireland, they started doing 101st, and then they realised, well, actually, the 82nd was here and was training here, so we all switched to 82nd, and we started to follow that a lot more carefully. So, each to their own, but I think this guy, to me, looks like an 82nd Airborne paratrooper. He's not wearing tons and tons of kit all over him. He's just tidy. He just looks tidy. But anyway, that's enough of my ramble. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've got a nice, simple, late war American paratrooper scheme in your head now. You can let me know in the comments what you think. And until next time, take care and stay safe.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.